A ledger does not raise its voice. That is the first thing you learn if you keep one for a living. It does not gasp, it does not accuse, it does not weep. It only sits, line upon patient line, and waits for someone to read it the way it was written, slowly and from the side. I learned to read that way long before I came to Harrowgate Palace, and I have never stopped. My name is Corin Vael, and on the night this began I was not even supposed to be holding a pen. I was supposed to be holding a post. Let me be plain about what I am, because the rest of it will make no sense otherwise. I am a guardsman of the royal house of Harrowgate, in the kingdom of Eldermore, and I am the only one of my company who came to the work the wrong way around. Most men arrive at the gate from the parade ground, all shoulders and drill. I arrived from the counting room. For 9 years before I ever wore the red wool of the Queen's Guard, I had been a clerk, first to a wool merchant, then to a shipping house, then, for one strange and educational year, to a man who lent money to lords and never once let one of them cheat him. I learned numbers the way other boys learn to swim, by being thrown in where it was deep, and discovering that the water held a shape if you stopped thrashing and felt for it. Then my eyes, which had served the counting room so well, began to fail me at the small print, and a merchant has no use for a clerk who must hold the page at arm's length. But the guard, it turned out, had a use for a man who could stand still, hold his nerve, and remember faces. So I traded the pen for the post, the green eyeshade for the bearskin, and I told myself the numbers were behind me. They were not. A man does not unlearn the shape of water. It was the 11th hour of a cold spring night, and I stood my post at the inner door of the household offices, the long stone gallery where the work of running a palace is done after the court has gone to its beds. Steward's rooms, the steward of plate, the keeper of the wardrobe, the controller of the kitchens, and at the far end, behind a door of dark oak with a brass plate gone green at the edges, the counting house of the household itself. That was where the money lived. Not the crown's great treasury, that is a fortress unto itself, with its own guard and its own grim keeper, but the household money, the river of small coin that pays the chandlers and the carters and the laundresses, that buys the candles and the firewood and the bread, that makes a palace turn over from one ordinary day to the next. A great deal of money in the end. A palace is a hungry thing. I had stood that post 100 nights and seen nothing but the lamplighter and the occasional clerk burning the midnight oil. It was the dullest post in the building, and the older men gave it to me as a kind of joke. Give the counting room man the counting room corridor, and let him be bored among his own kind. I did not mind. I have never been bored by quiet. Quiet is where you hear things. What I heard that night was a small wrong thing. The controller's first clerk, a young man named Tobin Ash, came down the gallery near midnight with a satchel under his arm, and his collar turned up though the gallery was not cold. He was a careful boy, Tobin, dutiful, the sort who apologizes when you step on his foot. He nodded to me as he always did. But his eyes did the small thing that eyes do when a man is carrying something he wishes you would not notice. They came to me, and then they went away too fast, and then they came back once more to be sure I had looked away. I had not looked away. I never do. It is the whole of my training, the one skill I brought from both my lives. I look, and I do not let my face know that I am looking. So I watched Tobin Ash let himself into the counting house with a key he should not have had at that hour. The controller keeps the night key, and the controller was abed, and I watched the line of lamplight under the door, and I counted. Not minutes, pages. You can hear a man turning pages if the door is old and the night is still. The small dry whisper of paper laid back upon paper, and I counted 41 of them before the light went out, and Tobin Ash came back into the gallery with his satchel, a little fuller than it had gone in. He did not look at me at all this time. That was the wrong thing. A man with nothing to hide nods twice. A man with something to hide nods once and forgets the second. Late work, I said, not a question. I had learned long ago that the best way to make a nervous man tell you the truth is to hand him a comfortable lie and watch whether he takes it. He took it. "The quarter end," he said, too quickly. "Lady Cray wants the charity disbursements reconciled before the audit. You know how she is about the almshouse." "I do," I said, which was a lie because I knew nothing about Lady Cray except her name and the fact that she was the mistress of the household's particular friend, a thin, elegant woman who moved through the court like a draft under a door. You did not see her come. You only felt the room grow colder. "Good of you to give it your night." "Someone must," he said, and there was something under the words, something that wanted out and did not dare, and then he was gone down the gallery and out the far door, and I was alone with the green brass plate and the cold and the small wrong thing he had left behind him like a smell. The quarter end, the charity disbursement, the almshouse. I want to be honest with you, because honesty is the only coin I have to spend in this telling. I did not, in that moment, suspect a conspiracy. I am not a man who sees plots behind the wainscoting. What I felt was smaller and older and harder to ignore, the clerk's itch, the thing that wakes in a man who has spent a third of his life balancing columns, when a number stands in the wrong place. Tobin Ash had said charity, and he had said it the way a man says a word he has been told to say. And he had taken 41 pages out of a counting house at midnight, when an honest reconciliation needs no pages taken anywhere. You reconcile a book by sitting with it, not by carrying it off. I stood my post until the relief came at the 3rd hour, and I said nothing to him, and I went to my narrow bed in the guard's range and did not sleep. I lay in the dark and did the thing I had not done in years. I built a column in my head. Charity I wrote at the top of it, and under that the only entries I had, a careful clerk who was suddenly frightened, a key that should not have been out, 41 pages, gone walking at midnight, a thin, cold woman whose name had been used like a shield. It was nothing, it was 4 lines and a feeling. But I have learned that a column with 4 lines in it is not nothing. It is the beginning of a book, and a book once begun wants to be finished. The only question, the question that would cost me more than I knew, and teach me what the red wool was truly for, was whether I had the patience to read it all the way to the end, one quiet line at a time, without ever once raising my voice. I decided that I did. I did not yet know what I was deciding. In the morning the palace was itself again, which is to say it was a machine that had forgotten it ever stopped. I want you to understand the place, because the place is half the story. Harrowgate Palace is not one building, but a town pretending to be a house, wings folded against wings, courtyards inside courtyards, a chapel, a riding hall, a hall of audience with a ceiling so high that birds get in and live there for whole summers before anyone troubles to put them out. Some 2,000 souls draw their bread from it. 300 of those are guards. The rest are the great invisible engine of the household, the cooks and the grooms and the seamstresses and the link boys and the clerks, the people who make a queen's day possible without once being seen by her. Queen Saralyn sits at the heart of it, and I will say of her only what I have seen with my own eyes, because I will not flatter a sovereign in a private record. She is good. I do not mean she is gentle, though she can be. I mean that she has the rarest thing a powerful person can have, which is the habit of asking before she does a thing, whether it is the right thing and not merely the easy one. I have watched her stop in a corridor to learn the name of a scullery maid's sick mother, and I have watched her, in the same hour, refuse a duke to his face so coolly that he forgot to be angry until he was 3 rooms away. Her husband, the Prince Consort Aldrich, is a soldier turned scholar, a broad, quiet man who reads more than he speaks. And there are the 2 children who I will come to, because in the end they are the reason any of this matters at all. The Princess Malin, who is 8 and asks too many questions, and the Prince Joran, who is 10 and is going to be a far better king than anyone yet suspects, because he watches everything and says little, which is the beginning of wisdom in a boy and the whole of it in a guardsman. Above the household, the engine, sits its driver, the mistress of the household. In those days the office was held by the Lady Verena Cray. I had told Tobin Ash I knew nothing of her but her name, and that morning I set about correcting it, in the slow sideways way that is the only safe way to learn anything in a palace. You do not ask after a great person directly. You let other people tell you about them, while they think they are telling you about something else. So I drank my morning ale in the guard's mess and listened. I sat with old Hesk, who had been 40 years in the red wool and knew where every body in the palace was buried, figuratively, and he claimed, and I believed him in 1 or 2 literal cases as well. I did not ask about Lady Cray. I asked about the almshouse, which is a duller and therefore safer subject, and let Hesk wander to her on his own. The Queen's almshouse, Hesk said, wiping foam from his mustache. Aye, her late mother's foundation, that old Queen Aldrich, may she rest. Houses the realm's worn-out servants, them as gave their years to the crown and have no kin to take them. Good work. The only thing the court agrees on, near enough. Even the worst of them gives to it, so as to be seen giving. Who runs it now? Officially the Queen. In the doing of it, Hesk shrugged. The household, Lady Cray's people. She made it her own these last 3 years, the almshouse and the rest of the Queen's charities both. Took it off the old controller's hands as a kindness, she said, him being slow with his sums. Now every penny of charity in this palace flows through her office before it flows anywhere else. He said it without weight, the way a man states a fact he has never once thought to question. Then he leaned in, and his voice dropped, not because the matter was secret but because gossip is more delicious whispered. Risen high has Lady Cray. 3 years gone, she was a baron's poor cousin doing the wardrobe accounts. Now she dines above the salt and lends money to earls. Funny how a poor cousin finds the coin to lend to earls. I made a noise of polite agreement and said nothing, but the clerk in me had pricked up his ears like a hound at a far horn. Every penny of charity flows through her office before it flows anywhere else. That is not in itself a crime. Somebody must hold the purse, better 1 office than 10. But I had spent a year working for a man who lent money to lords, and he had taught me a thing I have never been able to unknow. Watch the place where the money slows down. Money, like water, wants to run downhill from the giver to the given by the shortest path. Wherever it is made to pool, to wait, to pass through a particular set of hands before it goes on its way, you will find a man or a woman standing at the sluice gate, and you would do well to ask what they are taking as it goes by. Lady Verena Cray stood at the sluice gate of every charitable penny in Harrowgate Palace, and a baron's poor cousin had, in 3 years, found the coin to lend to earls. 4 lines in my column had become 6. I should have left it there. A wiser man, a man with more to lose and less old ink in his blood, would have left it there. What was it to me, after all? I was a guardsman. My duty was the post, the gate, the still figure at the door, not the books behind it. The crown employed controllers and auditors, and a whole gilded apparatus of men whose actual work this was, and who were paid handsomely to do it. But I had stood in the gallery and watched a frightened boy carry off 41 pages at midnight, and I had heard a word charity used as a man uses a stone to weight down something he does not want to float to the surface. And there is a thing about my trade, my first trade, that the post never quite drilled out of me. A false number is not a private sin. It is a theft from someone. Every penny that pools wrongly in one set of hands is a penny that did not reach the hands it was meant for, and the hands the almshouse money was meant for belonged to the realm's worn-out servants, the ones with no kin to take them, the ones who had given their years to the crown and were now too old and too tired to so much as notice they were being robbed. That is who you steal from when you steal from a charity, not the crown. The crown does not feel it. You steal from the people least able to feel it and least able to fight back, which is precisely why it is so safe and so very, very common. I did not decide in the mess to expose Lady Cray. I want to be exact, because the exactness is the whole lesson of this account. I decided only to read one number. To go, on my next free afternoon, to the place where any subject of Eldermore is permitted to go, the public register of the Queen's Charities, which is kept open for inspection in the Hall of Records precisely, so that no one need ever take a great person's honesty on faith, and to look, with my own failing eyes, at what the almshouse was said to have received, and to set it, in my own head, against what I had seen carried off in a satchel at midnight. One number, that was all I meant to look at. I have noticed that this is how every long road begins, not with a vow, with one number and the inability to stop looking at it. The Hall of Records sits in the oldest part of the palace, a low stone vault that smells of dust and tallow and the particular sour sweetness of very old paper, and it is presided over by a man named Master Edric Pell, who is perhaps the only person in Harrowgate I would call wholly without ambition. Pell loves records the way other men love wine or women or God. He does not care what is in them. He cares that they are correct, complete, and in their proper place. A man like that is more dangerous to a liar than 100 zealots, because he cannot be flattered and does not know how to be bribed. He simply wants the books to be right. I came to him on my next free afternoon, out of the red wool and in a plain coat, because a guardsman asking after charity accounts is a noticeable thing, and a private citizen exercising his lawful right to inspect a public register is not. Pell did not ask why I wanted the almshouse rolls. He never asks why. He only asked which years, and when I said the last 3, he gave me a small dry look that I did not understand until much later, and fetched them himself, and set them before me with the tenderness of a man laying a child down to sleep. I read for 2 hours. I will not pretend it was thrilling, it was columns. But I had read columns for 9 years, and there is a music to a healthy account that you come to hear without listening, the way you hear your own heartbeat, a steady give and take, money in, money out, the totals walking hand in hand down the years. A sick account sounds wrong before you can say why. There is a hitch in it, a held breath, a place where the music stumbles. The almshouse account stumbled in the 3rd year, Lady Cray's 3rd year. It was nothing you could point to and call a crime. The gross figure, the total given to the Queen's Charities, had risen handsomely. The court was generous, or wished to be seen to be, and the almshouse rolls swelled with names of donors great and small. But the net, the money that actually reached the almshouse, the bread and coal and physic that actually warmed the realm's worn-out servants, had not risen with it. It had crept up a little enough to look like growth, while the giving had doubled. Between the great river that flowed in and the thin stream that trickled out, something had widened, a gap, a pool. And in the rolls, the gap had a name. It appeared a dozen times across the 3rd year, always in the same dry hand, always attached to sums that were never quite large enough to draw the eye. Disbursement, charitable, for the foundation for the relief of distressed gentlefolk. Sometimes the Eldermore Benevolent Society. Sometimes the Widows and Orphans Fund of the Western Shires. Charity flowing out of the Queen's Charity and into other charities, which is not, on its face, a wrong thing. Good works share their bread. But there were a great many of these onward gifts, and they were all new, all begun in the 3rd year, and not one of them had been there before Lady Verena Cray took the purse. I copied down the names. 3 at first, then 6, then 9 charitable bodies I had never heard of, each receiving from the Queen's Foundation a steady, modest, unremarkable tithe. I copied the sums, and then I did the only arithmetic that mattered, the arithmetic that the rolls were arranged very cleverly to discourage you from ever doing. I added the onward gifts together, all 9, across the year. Master Pell, who had been pretending to dust a shelf within earshot, heard me set down my pen. The total of the onward charitable gifts, the money that left the Queen's Foundation to relieve distressed gentlefolk and widows and orphans in shires I could not have found on a map, was very nearly the whole of the gap, very nearly the whole of the pool. The money that had not reached the almshouse had not been stolen exactly. It had been given away, given to charity, given so generously, so virtuously, so unimpeachably, that to question it would make you look like a man who begrudged orphans their bread. That is the thing about a clever theft. It does not hide from you. It dares you to accuse it of being a good deed. "You added them up," said Master Pell quietly. He had stopped dusting. I looked up. He was watching me with an expression I had not seen on him before, not curiosity, which Pell did not have, but something more like recognition. "You are the second man in 3 years to add them up," he said. "The first was the old controller." Before Lady Cray relieved him of the work on account of his being slow with his sums. He let that sit a moment. He was not slow with his sums, you understand. I keep the records. He was the fastest man with a column I ever knew. He added these up. And then he came to me, very pale, and asked me a question I have asked myself every day since, and I could not answer him then, and I cannot answer you now. "What question?" "He asked me," said Master Pell, "where a man goes in this palace to be heard, when the wrong he has found leads upward instead of down." The vault was very quiet. Somewhere overhead a bird that had got into the high hall was beating against a window, a small, soft, frantic sound, over and over. "What happened to him?" I asked. "The controller." "He retired," said Master Pell, "to his daughter's house in the country very suddenly the week after he came to me, with a generous pension, from the Foundation for the Relief of Distressed Gentlefolk." He turned away and resumed his dusting, his back to me, his voice as flat and final as a closed ledger. "Put the rolls back where you found them, guardsmen, and do yourself a kindness. Do not add anything else up." I put the rolls back where I found them. I thanked him. I walked out into the gray spring afternoon with 9 names copied small inside my coat, and a cold settling into me that had nothing to do with the weather. I had come to look at one number. I had found 9 of them, and a gap with a name, and a controller pensionied into silence by the very fund that had swallowed the orphan's bread, and a record-keeper who knew all of it and could do nothing but tell men to stop counting. The wrong led upward. That was the whole of it and the worst of it. Every instinct of my second life, the guardsman's life, said the same thing the post itself says. Stand still, hold your ground, do not move until duty moves you. But duty in the guard points outward at the gate, at the threat from beyond the walls. I had found a threat that lived inside the walls, that wore the household's own livery, that had made itself out of the Queen's own goodness. And there was no drill for it, no order, no officer to whom I could report and be relieved of the burden. There was only me and 9 names, and the question Master Pell could not answer. I walked back toward the guard's range as the lamps were being lit, and I made myself a promise that I have kept, and that has cost me, and that I do not regret. I would not raise my voice. I would not accuse. I would not go charging at a woman who had pensionied a controller into the grave with kindness, armed with nothing but a feeling and 9 names. That is how an honest man gets himself retired to a daughter's house in the country. I would do instead the one thing she could not buy and could not silence, because it makes no sound at all. I would read. Quietly, patiently, 1 line at a time, in the dark hours when the palace forgot it was watched, I would trace every one of those 9 names back to wherever it truly led, and I would not say a single word about it to a single living soul until I held the whole book in my hands, finished, balanced, and impossible to deny. It took me the better part of a year. This is the account of that year. A man who wishes to trace 9 charities and not be noticed must first solve a problem of time. My time was not my own. The guard owns your hours the way the tide owns the shore. You stand your posts when you are told to stand them, you sleep when you can, and your free afternoons come twice a fortnight and are watched. I could not be forever absent from the range, slipping off to the Hall of Records, without the absences themselves becoming a thing other men remarked upon. And I could not be remarked upon. The whole of my plan, such as it was, depended on being exactly what everyone already believed me to be, the dull counting room man on the dull counting room post, too plotting to be a danger to anyone. So I made the post itself my instrument. I asked, with the mild persistence of a man who genuinely is what he pretends to be given the night gallery permanently, the household offices, the very corridor where it had begun. It is the worst post in the building. No man fights you for it. The captain gave it to me with visible relief, glad to have one fewer body to argue with over the desirable gates. And so I came to stand, 4 nights of every 7, in the long stone gallery where the household's money lived, with nothing to do but watch a row of locked doors and listen to the palace breathe. It was, I came to understand, the most useful post in Eldermore if you knew how to stand it. Because the night gallery is where the records are. Not the public rolls in Pell's vault, those are the clean face the household shows the world. The working books, the day-to-day ledgers, the correspondence, the file of receipts and warrants and onward orders, those live in the household offices, behind the doors I guarded, and they come out only at night when the clerks burn their candles, and they go back in only at night when the clerks go to bed. I could not enter those rooms. I had no key and no right, and to be caught inside one would have ended everything. But I did not need to enter them. I needed only to watch what went in and out of them, and in whose hands, and at what hours, and to whom, and to keep, in my head and never on paper, a second set of books, not of the money but of the men who moved it. I began with the satchel. Tobin Ash carried his satchel out of the counting house on the last working night of every quarter near midnight with his collar turned up. I had seen it once before I knew to look. Now I looked. 4 times across that first season I watched him do it, the careful boy, the apologetic boy, the boy who said someone must asterisk with a thing crawling under his voice. I never stopped him. I never searched him. I had no power to, and to try would have been to show my hand. I simply marked the nights. And I marked, too, where he went, not out of the building, as an honest clerk going home would go, but up the back stair toward the upper galleries where the great officers had their apartments, up toward the cold draught under the door that was Lady Verena-Cray. He went to her, 4 times that season, near midnight, with a fuller satchel than he had carried in, and each time the next morning the public rolls in Pell's vault grew a little, a fresh, virtuous, modest gift to a charity in a shire I could not find. I had the rhythm of it now. The river came in, the court's donations, the great show of giving. It pooled in the counting house, and once a quarter in the dark, the careful boy carried the pooled remainder up the back stair to the thin, cold woman, and out of her office the next morning flowed 9 streams of charity to 9 names. I could see the shape of the machine. I could not yet see inside it. I did not know whether the 9 charities were real and merely a place to hide money in plain sight, or whether they were nothing at all, names on a roll and a hole at the bottom. To learn that, I would have to leave the palace. This is where I tell you about Wren. Among the household's 2,000 souls was a girl of perhaps 19 named Wren Aldis, who carried letters. The palace generates an ocean of correspondence, and a small army of runners moves it to the city, to the ports, to the great houses of the realm, and Wren was the quickest and least noticed of them. A small, sharp-eyed person who could go anywhere a letter could go and be remembered by no one. I had done her a kindness once early on, without thinking much of it. A drunken undergroom had cornered her in a passage near the stables, and I had happened by, and I had not needed to do more than stand where I stood and let the man see the red wool and the size of me, and he had remembered urgent business elsewhere. Wren had thanked me with a fierce dignity that I liked, and had said, in the way of someone who pays her debts, that if I ever needed a thing carried or a thing found, I had only to ask. I had not meant to call in the debt, but a man tracing charities to shires he cannot find needs eyes outside the walls, and I had no others I could trust. So one gray morning I asked Wren whether, on her rounds in the city, she might do me a small favor and look for a thing. What thing? A door, I said. 9 doors in truth, but start with 1. And I gave her the first name, the Foundation for the Relief of Distressed Gentlefolk. A charity, I told her, that gave generously to good causes and surely had a house somewhere in the city, an office, a board of worthy gentlemen, a brass plate by a door. I would like to know where its door is, I said, and what is behind it. Wren looked at me a long moment with those sharp eyes, and I saw her understand that I was asking her for something that was not a kindness but a risk, and I saw her decide that she did not care. "You're not asking after a charity," she said. It was not a question, any more than my late work to Tob and Ash had been. "No," I admitted. "I'm asking after a door that I think is painted on a wall." She found it in 6 days. She found it because she was clever and because no one in the whole world is less suspicious than a girl with a satchel of letters asking, brightly, after a charity she wants to give her dead aunt's legacy to. The Foundation for the Relief of Distressed Gentlefolk did have an address, a respectable one, on a respectable street near the lawyer's quarter. It had a brass plate. It had behind the plate a single small room over a chandler's shop, and in the room a single desk, and at the desk, 3 mornings a week, a single elderly man who took in the post and forwarded it on and could tell Wren nothing whatever about distressed gentlefolk, because, as he confided to her over the tea she had charmed out of him, he had never relieved a single one in his life. He was paid, he said, a modest wage by a firm of lawyers to sit at the desk, receive the Foundation's correspondence and send it on sealed to another address. He did not know what was in it. He did not ask. The wage was good and the work was easy, and a man his age was glad of both. "A door painted on a wall," Wren reported, with the grim satisfaction of someone who has confirmed a bad thing she half hoped was good. "There's nobody home. The charity's a name and a desk and an old man who forwards the post. Where does the post go?" "That," I said, "is the next door." And so it went, all that first half of the year. Wren walked the city streets and I stood the night gallery, and between us slowly we mapped the machine from both ends. Each of the 9 charities was a door painted on a wall, a name, an address, a desk, a forwarding instruction, and every one of them forwarded its post to the same place, a firm of lawyers in the new town, sober and gilt-lettered and entirely real, called Marrow, Quill, and Scythe. 9 streams of the Queen's charity, flowing out through 9 painted doors, all gathering again, in the dark, behind one set of lawyers' shutters. I had found the mouth of the river. I had not yet found where it emptied, but I knew now, past any doubt, what I had not let myself fully believe in Pell's dusty vault, that the orphans and the widows and the distressed gentlefolk did not exist, had never existed, were 9 costumes worn by a single hidden body, and that the bread of the realm's worn-out servants was not being given away to better causes at all. It was being gathered, pooled, carried in the dark to one room. And from that room it was going somewhere, to do something, that someone had taken very great pains to ensure no honest man would ever add up. I wrote nothing down. I held it all in the second set of books, the books in my head, where Lady Cray could not pension it into the country. And I stood my dull post, 4 nights of 7, and waited for the machine to show me the rest of itself. It did, but not in the way I expected, and not before it nearly showed me to it instead. The first sign that the machine had begun, faintly, to feel me reading it came on a night in early summer, and it came in a form so small that a man who was not a clerk would have missed it entirely. Tob and Ash stopped turning up his collar. For 2 full quarters I had watched the careful boy carry his satchel up the back stair with his collar turned up against a cold that was not there, the small tell of a man performing innocence to himself. Then one quarter end, he came down the gallery with the satchel and his collar flat and his step easy, and he nodded to me twice, the honest man's nod, and said pleasantly that it was a fine warm night for the season, and went on up the stair whistling. A frightened man does not learn to whistle on his own. He is taught. Someone had noticed Tob and Ash was frightened, and had taken the trouble to reassure him, or to warn him to stop showing it. And a man does not get reassured about a thing unless someone above him has begun to wonder whether the thing is being seen. I had been seen wondering. I did not yet know by whom or how much. But the machine had twitched, the way a spider twitches when a far thread of its web is touched, and I understood that my time of perfect invisibility was ending, and that I had better learn the rest of the truth quickly, before the spider learned the shape of the fly. So I changed my method. I had been watching the satchel, now I began watching the lawyers. Marrow, quill, and scythe were real and respectable, and therefore careless in the way that only the respectable can afford to be. They believed themselves beyond suspicion, and a man who believes himself beyond suspicion stops taking pains. Wren, who by now had developed a positive appetite for the work and a frightening talent for it, set herself to learning the firm's habits the way a poacher learns a wood. Who came and went. When, which clerk carried which papers to which destination. And above all, for this is where the respectable always betray themselves, where the firm did its banking, because money in the end must touch a bank, and a bank keeps records, and records can be read by anyone patient enough to stand near them. She could not, of course, read the firm's accounts. Those were locked away as tight as the Crown's own. But she did not need to read them. She needed only to watch which of the firm's people walked, on the appointed days, to which counting house, carrying the firm's deposits, and then to watch what came back out the other side. Because a sum of money that goes into a bank under one name and comes out, transformed, under another is the very moment a hidden river breaks the surface, and if you are standing in the right place at the right hour, you can see it shine. It took Wren 3 weeks to find the right place and the right hour. What she saw there changed the whole shape of the thing for me, and turned a financial puzzle into something with a beating, frightened heart. The money that flowed out of marrow, quill, and scythe, the gathered bread of 9 painted door charities, did not vanish into a chest, as I had half imagined, to be spent on a great lady's silks and earrings. Lady Cray took a portion, certainly. I would learn later exactly how much, and it was not small. But the greater part of it did something stranger and far more dangerous than buy a wardrobe. It went back out into the realm, and it went, every penny of it, to people. Not to charities, to people, to particular, named individual people in modest regular sums like wages. Wren brought me the first 3 names she was able to attach to the payments, and I stood in the night gallery and turned them over in the dark, and at first they meant nothing to me because they were only names. A Master Tolliver, a Mistress Greaves, a man called Padraig Hone. I did not know them, but I had learned in my first life that when you do not understand a list of names, you do not stare harder at the names. You ask what they have in common. So I asked Wren to learn what these 3 people were, not who, but what, their offices, their trades, their place in the world. She came back, and she was not smiling now. Master Tolliver was a clerk in the Office of Petitions, the office that decides which of the 1,000 pleas sent up to the Queen each month ever reach her hand, and which are quietly turned away at the door. Mistress Greaves was the head laundress of the royal nursery wing, a woman who came and went, unwatched and unsuspected, from the very rooms where the Princess Maelin and the Prince Joran slept. And Padraig Hone was an under-steward of the Queen's own table, the man who arranged the order of her audiences, who knew, days in advance, exactly which great person the Queen would see and which she would not, and in what humor she was likely to be when she saw them. I stood very still in the gallery for a long time after Wren left me. The post is good for that. It teaches a man to stand still while everything inside him is moving. Because I understood now what I had found, and it was so much larger and so much worse than a stolen purse that I felt the floor of it open under me. Lady Verena Cray was not a thief, or she was, but theft was the least of it, the small visible coin at the top of a far deeper enterprise. What she had built in 3 patient years, using the Queen's own goodness as its skin and the orphan's bread as its fuel, was an asterisk machine for buying people. A network. Quiet, modest, untraceable wages, flowing out through 9 painted doors and a respectable law firm, into the hands of the small invisible servants who stood at every doorway of the Queen's life. The clerk who chose which pleas she heard, the steward who chose whom she saw, the laundress who came and went from her children's rooms. None of them powerful, all of them placed, each one a small lever bought cheaply in a hidden hand, and a great many small levers in one hand are a great deal of power over a throne. She was not stealing from the Queen. She was, slowly and invisibly and with perfect deniability, taking the Queen apart from the inside, surrounding her with a household that smiled and bowed and served, and was, secretly, in another woman's pay. So that one day when it mattered, the Queen would reach for a lever to be heard, to be seen, to be safe, and find that every lever in her own house answered to someone else. And the laundress in the nursery who came and went from the rooms where the children slept. That was the line that I could not stand still under. A clerk bought, a steward bought, those were wrongs against the crown, and the crown is a strong old thing and can bear a great deal. But a stranger's coin in the pocket of the woman who walks unwatched into the room where the Princess Maelin sleeps, that was no longer a matter of ledgers. That was a guardsman's matter. That was the exact thing the red wool exists for, the threat from beyond the walls that has gotten asterisk inside the walls, dressed in livery, paid in the dark, standing closer to the children than I would ever be allowed to stand. I had begun this to settle a number in a column. I understood now that I had walked, one quiet line at a time, straight into the thing the guard had armed me against my whole second life, and that I was the only man in the palace who could see it, precisely because I was the only one looking, and that I could tell no one, because I did not yet know how high the bought hands reached, and any voice I raised might be a voice that traveled by a back stair at midnight, straight to the thin, cold woman at the top of the back stair. Where a man goes in this palace to be heard, when the wrong he has found leads upward instead of down. I did not have Pell's question answered yet, but I had at last the beginning of an answer of my own. You do not go anywhere, you do not be heard, not yet. You finish the book first. You make it so complete, so balanced, so impossible to deny or to pension into the country, that when you finally do raise your voice, it will not be your voice at all. It will be the number's voice, and numbers, unlike men, cannot be frightened, cannot be bought, and cannot be made to retire to a daughter's house in the country. I had perhaps half the book, I needed the rest, and the spider had felt the thread. The race, though neither of us yet spoke its name, had begun. The laundress would not wait for the book. That was the hard truth I had to swallow in the days after Wren brought me the names. A book of evidence is a patient thing, and I am a patient man, but patience has a limit, and the limit is this. You do not let a bought stranger walk unwatched into a sleeping child's room for one more night than you must, on the chance that watching her a while longer might strengthen your case. A clerk in the office of petitions can be left in place. A steward of the table can be left in place. Their mischief is slow and reversible, and does no one a bodily harm. But Mistress Greaves had a key to the nursery wing and a stranger's coin in her pocket, and I did not know, could not know, with the evidence I had, whether she was a sleeping lever, bought and waiting and never yet used, or a loaded one. So I did the thing that cost me a piece of my plan, and I have never been sorry. I gave up a little of my invisibility to make a child safer, because a guardsman who would not do that has mistaken the post for the purpose. I could not have the laundress removed. I had no proof I dared show, and to accuse her was to fire a flare over the whole hidden field. But I could change the ground she stood on. I went to the captain, not with the truth, never the truth, but with a guardsman's plain and unremarkable concern, and I said that I had been thinking in my dull way about the nursery wing, and that it troubled me that the night watch on it was thin, a single man at the end of a long gallery, and that for so small a cost we might double it and stand easy. It was the kind of cautious, fussy, over-careful suggestion that everyone already expected from the counting room man. And the captain, who liked me precisely because I gave him no trouble, agreed to it without a second thought, glad to be seen tightening security at no risk to anyone's comfort. And so a second guard came to stand in the nursery gallery at night, and I, by quiet arrangement, took that post myself 2 nights of the week, trading away my beloved counting house gallery for it, telling the captain I wished to share the dull duties fairly and not hog the easy ones. He thought me a saint. I was only a man who wanted to be standing in the room's own doorway the next time a bought stranger came through it in the dark. She came on my 3rd night there. I want to be careful in how I tell this because nothing happened, and the nothing is the whole point. Mistress Greaves came up the nursery gallery a little after the 2nd hour with an armful of fresh linen, as a head laundress legitimately might, and she saw me, a second guard where there had been none, a tall still figure in red wool standing square in the lamplight outside the children's door, eyes forward, saying nothing. She did not falter. She was good. They were all good, the people Lady Cray had bought, because she did not buy clumsy ones. She bobbed me a respectful little nod and made to go in with her linen. "I'll take it," I said. It was all I said. I held out my arms for the linen, the way a man does a small courtesy, and I kept my eyes forward and my voice flat and pleasant, and I did not move from the doorway, and I let her understand, without one accusing word, that the linen would go in and she would not tonight, not while I stood there. She looked at me for the length of a held breath, and something passed behind her eyes, calculation, I think. The quick sum of a bought servant working out whether this was a wall she could go around or one she had better not be seen trying. And then she smiled, and handed me the linen, and said it was kind of me to save her old legs the trouble, and went away down the gallery, and did not come back up it that night. That was all. A guard took a stranger's linen at a door. Nothing happened. No alarm, no struggle, no proof of anything, nothing I could ever have told a court. But I had stood with my own body in the one gap in the wall around those children that a stranger's coin had bought open, and I had filled it, and I had let the buyer's servant carry word back down the back stair that the gap was filled. It was the first move I had made that the spider could not fail to feel, and I made it knowing that, and made it anyway, because some things you do not leave undone to protect a plan. The plan is to protect the children. If the plan ever requires you to leave the children less protected, the plan is wrong. I should say something here about the cost of standing still, because a man could read this account and think it was all cleverness, all patient reading and quiet moves, and miss the part that nearly broke me, which was the waiting itself. You do not understand, until you have done it, what it takes to know a wrong and not cry it out. I had stood my whole second life on the principle that the disciplined man does not react, that the stillness is the strength, and I had believed it the way you believe a thing you have never truly been tested on. The post tests your patience against boredom, against cold, against an aching back and a long night. It does not, usually, test your patience against the knowledge that worn-out old men and women, who gave their years to the crown and have no one left to speak for them, are going cold and hungry tonight because of a theft you could name and cannot yet prove. That is a different cold than the nights. It gets into the marrow and it stays. There were nights, I will be honest, because this account is worth nothing if it is not honest, when I stood the dark gallery and hated my own discipline, when every cell of me wanted to go up the back stair and put the thin, cold woman against the wall and make her give it back, the bread, the coal, the years. When the patient plan felt like a coward's excuse, a fine name for doing nothing while the suffering went on. I do not pretend I floated above that serene. I stood in it. I shook with it some nights in the dark where no one could see, and I made myself do the only thing that answered it, which was to remember very precisely what raising my voice too soon would buy. Nothing. A pensionied guard, a buried book, a triumphant spider, and the orphans hungry still, only now with no one left who could even see it. The math of it was merciless, and it was the only thing that held me. Patience is not the absence of the wish to act. It is the wish to act, held in both hands every night and not let go of. It was in one of those raw stretches that the spider's web nearly caught me, and it caught me through the very kindness I had refused. A new man joined my watch, a young guard named Bellamy, eager and likable, transferred into the night galleries from the gate. I thought nothing of it at first. Men move between posts, but Bellamy was friendly in a way that did not quite fit the dull, dark corridor. He fell into step with me on my rounds, asked me easily about my old clerking days, about how a man came to know so much about books and sums, about whether I did not find the night gallery strange dull work for a man with a head like mine, about, and here, only here, did the small alarm sound in me, whether I had ever had cause to look into the household accounts myself, in my dull off-hours just out of the old habit. He asked it lightly. He asked it twice, on 2 different nights in 2 different shapes. I knew that shape. It was the shape of a question asked on someone else's behalf. Bellamy, I came to understand, was not a friend the watch had sent me. He was a kindness Lady Cray had sent me, a pleasant, likable, untraceable pair of ears, placed at my elbow to learn gently over weeks whether the dull man was as dull as he seemed. I do not think Bellamy himself knew what he was. That was her genius. She rarely told the lever it was a lever. He was simply a young man who had been done a small kindness, a good post, a word of favor, and who had been asked ever so casually by someone he was grateful to be friendly with the counting-room veteran and mention anything interesting he learned. He thought he was being sociable. He was being a hook. I will not pretend it did not frighten me. It frightened me more than the laundress, more than the summons that was coming, because it meant she had not crossed me off after all, or had crossed me off and then thought better of it, and had set a patient watch on me of exactly the kind I had set on her. The hunter hunted by his own method. And I had nearly walked into it because I was raw and tired and grateful, God help me, for a friendly voice in the dark gallery after months of speaking to no one. The kindness is always the hook. I had said that to Tobin Ash in my head 100 times, and here it was reaching for me, and it had very nearly worked, because a lonely man is the easiest man in the world to buy, and I had let myself become lonely. So I gave Bellamy what the spider would want to hear, and gave it to him slowly, so it would seem dragged out of me rather than offered. I let him learn that, yes, I had been a clerk, and yes, I sometimes missed it, and no, I had never once looked at the household books. Why would I? For my eyes had gone bad at the small print. That was the whole reason I left the trade. A man cannot read a ledger who must hold the page at arm's length. It was true, that last part, gloriously true, the one true defense I had. My eyes truly had failed at the small print years ago. I made sure Bellamy saw me struggle once to read a posted duty roster, holding it out and squinting, and finally asking him, with a rueful laugh, to read it for me. A man who cannot read a roster cannot read a secret ledger. I built that into him patiently over a fortnight, and I watched him carry it away, and I knew it would go up the back stair, and I knew what it would say. The dull man is duller than we feared. He is half blind. He could not read the books if he tried. Cross him off. Truly this time. It is a strange thing to defend yourself with your own infirmity, to make a weakness into a wall. But that is the whole art of the patient man. You do not fight the watcher. You give the watcher the very picture he came to find, so completely that he stops looking. I had spent a year being exactly what everyone believed me to be. Now I was a half-blind old clerk who missed the quiet, and I made it true enough to touch, and the web let me go. But it had touched me. That was the lesson I carried out of that fortnight, and it changed how I moved for the rest of the affair. The spider was not weaving in one place, fat and far off. She was alert and patient and reaching, and she had nearly had me through the one gap in my own wall I had not thought to guard, my loneliness. I had been so careful about the books and the satchels and the painted doors. I had forgotten that a man is not a column either, and that the same hunger for a kind word that had bought Tobin Ash and the laundress and young Bellamy lived in me too, and would be used against me if I let it show. I did not speak to Bellamy as a friend again. It cost me something to do it. He was a good lad, and it was not his fault he had been made a hook, but I could not afford the warmth, and I let it cool, and he drifted in time to other company, never knowing he had been used or that I had known. I hope he reads this someday and forgives me the coldness. It was the price of the thing, and the orphan's bread was on the other side of the scale. The cost came 3 days later, and it came, as the worst costs do, dressed as a kindness. I was summoned, not by the captain, by a footman in the household's own livery, who found me at the range and told me, with elaborate courtesy, that the mistress of the household requested the pleasure of a brief word, at my convenience, this afternoon in her apartments. At my convenience, as though a guardsman summoned by Lady Verona Cray had a convenience. I had never been in her presence. I had spent half a year building a book about her in the dark, and I had never once stood in a room with her, and now she had sent for me by name to her own rooms, the cold draught at the top of the back stair, 3 days after I had blocked her servant at a child's door. There was no chance it was a coincidence. She had felt the thread and traced it, and found at the end of it a single plodding guardsman, and she had decided, with the calm efficiency I would come to respect even as I worked to destroy her, to look the fly in the eye herself before she decided what to do about it. I went, of course. You do not refuse the mistress of the household. And I went with my heart steady and my hands cold, because I knew I was walking into the one place my whole method had been built to avoid close enough to be seen, to be read, to be measured by the very mind I was trying to outlast, and that everything now depended on her looking at me and seeing exactly what everyone else saw. The dull man, the counting-room man, the fussy, over-careful, harmless saint of the night galleries, too plotting to be a danger to anyone. I had spent half a year making myself invisible by being exactly what I appeared to be. Now I would have to do it to her face, while she searched mine for the reader who had been turning her secret pages in the dark. It was the hardest stillness I have ever stood. And it was not at a gate, and there was no rifle in my hands, and no one watching to admire the discipline of it. There was only a thin, cold, elegant woman in a warm, bright room, pouring me, a guardsman, a small glass of wine with her own hand, and watching me over the rim of it with eyes the precise gray of a bank ledger, and asking me ever so gently how I was finding the night galleries, and whether I did not think the work a little dull. "Dull suits me, my lady," I said. "I was a clerk before I was a guard. I find I miss the quiet." I had decided, on the walk up the back stair, to give her that one true thing, that I had been a clerk, because she would learn it in an hour from any man in the mess, and a lie she could catch was worth more to me as a truth she could not. Let her have the clerk. The whole game now was to make her believe she had the whole clerk, the dull, retired, harmless one, the man who missed the quiet, and not the one who had spent half a year reading her in the dark. A clerk, she said it as though it were a charming little fact about a pet. How interesting. Then you'll understand me when I say that I am, at heart, a clerk myself, a keeper of a very large and very tedious account. She sat and gestured me to a chair, which is a thing that is not done. A guardsman does not sit in the apartments of a great officer, and I understood that the breach of form was itself a message. I can unmake the rules in this room. Watch. I sat. Running a household this size, guardsman, is nothing but sums. Thousands of people, every one of them needing to be paid, fed, placed, kept. And do you know what I have learned in 3 years of it that I did not know before? My lady, that kindness, she said, is the most efficient currency there is, far more efficient than gold. Give a man gold and he spends it and forgets you. But place a man, find him a post, lift his daughter out of want, settle a quiet pension on his old father, and he is yours for life and grateful, and you have spent almost nothing, and no one can ever say you did a wrong thing because you didn't. You did a kindness. Her gray eyes did not leave my face. The whole art of running a great house, I have found, is the patient, invisible doing of kindnesses. So many small kindnesses that, one day, when you need a thing done, you find there is no one left in the house who would not gladly do it for you. That is not corruption, guardsmen. That is administration. The two are distinguished only by the spite of people who were not clever enough to do it first. There it was. She was not threatening me. She was recruiting me. She had looked at her thread, found a clerk at the end of it, and decided that the most efficient thing to do with a clerk who had perhaps begun to count was not to crush him. Crushing leaves a body, and a body is a question someone might one day ask, but to do him a kindness and make him one more grateful, placed, untraceable lever in the machine. She was offering me, in that warm, bright room with that small glass of wine, the same coin she had pressed into the palm of the clerk of petitions, and the steward of the table, and the laundress at the children's door. And I will be honest, because the honesty is the test of this account. For the length of one breath, I understood why they had all taken it. It is so reasonable when it is offered. It is dressed as advancement, as recognition, as a great person noticing your worth at last. It costs you, at first, nothing, no betrayal you can name, no door you must open, only a vague and pleasant sense that you are now on the right side of things, the inside, the warm side, and that the warm side will look after you. The hook is not the gold. The hook is the belonging. Lady Verena Cray did not buy people with money. She bought them with the feeling of being chosen, and the money was only the proof of it. And that is why her machine had grown so quietly and so far, because every part of it believed sincerely that it had simply been lucky enough to be appreciated. "You're a thoughtful man, I can see," she went on, into my silence, mistaking it. I prayed she was mistaking it for the silence of a man tempted. "The guard wastes you on a dark corridor. A man with a head for sums and a steady disposition could be useful to me in the household. Better quarters, better pay, and the comfort, guardsmen, of knowing that the people who matter in this house know your name and think well of you. There is no security in this world like being thought well of by the right people." She smiled and refilled my untouched glass by a courteous half-inch, and added, in exactly the same gentle voice, without any change at all, the only true sentence she spoke that afternoon: "It is so much pleasanter than the alternative." And so the offer and the threat were the same words, and that was the most frightening thing of all, because it meant she had not yet decided which I was. She was holding both doors open and watching to see which one I walked toward. If I took the kindness, I was bought and safe and finished as an honest man. If I refused it, if I let her see, by so much as a flicker, that I knew what I was refusing, then I was not a tempted clerk after all, but a danger, and a danger gets pensioni to a daughter's house in the country, and I had no daughter and no country house, only 9 names in my head and a book half-written that would die with me unread. There was only one road through that room, and it was the road I had walked my whole second life. I had to take neither door. I had to be too dull to understand that there were doors at all. So I did the hardest thing the post had ever taught me. I let my face do nothing. I looked at the wine and at her with the mild, slightly slow, slightly flattered expression of a plain man who has been complimented by a great lady and cannot quite follow her drift, and I said, "That's very good of you to say, my lady. I'm not sure I'd know what to do with better quarters. I'm a creature of habit, but I'm grateful you'd think of it." And I let the gratitude be real, because a piece of it was real gratitude that she had shown me with her own mouth, the exact shape of the thing I was hunting, the philosophy of it, the engine of it, so much more than 9 names could ever have told me. I'll just go on standing my post, I think, if it's all the same. A man knows what he's good at. I watched her weigh me. It took perhaps 3 seconds, and they were the longest 3 seconds of the year. I saw her gray eyes move over my plain, harmless face, looking for the reader, and I prayed to whatever keeps guardsmen that the half-year of standing still had built a wall she could not see past, and I saw her decide. I saw her file me, in that ledger-mind of hers, under the heading where she kept the harmless. A dull man, a creature of habit, of no use and no danger, not worth a kindness and not worth a worry. I saw the small relaxation at the corner of her mouth, the relief of a busy administrator crossing a trivial line off a long list. "Of course," she said warmly and rose, which meant I was dismissed. How refreshing in this house to meet a man who is content. Go back to your quiet, guardsman. I shan't trouble you again. I bowed and I went, and I walked down the back stair with my dull, harmless face on until I was 3 galleries away and certain no one could see me. And only then did I let it fall, and stand for a moment against a cold stone wall and breathe. She had decided I was nothing. That was the whole of what I needed. She had looked the fly in the eye and seen a fly and crossed me off her list, and that meant the spider would stop pulling at this particular thread, would go back to its larger weaving and forget the dull man in the dark corridor entirely. It was the best possible outcome, and it changed everything, and it set the trap I would nearly die in. Because I understood, walking down that stair, that I had just been handed the one thing my patience had lacked. She thought I was finished. She would not watch me now, and a man no one is watching can read in the dark for as long as he likes. The game had changed. It was no longer whether the spider would feel me. It had felt me and looked and dismissed me. Now the only question left was whether I could finish the book before she remembered, even once, to wonder whether a dull man might have been counting after all. I had perhaps half the answer. And I now knew, from her own mouth, exactly what the other half would have to prove. Not that money had moved, money moves 1,000 innocent ways, but that it had moved to buy obedience, and that the obedience pointed, in the end, not at the household's good but at her own hand on the levers of the queen. Philosophy is not a crime. I needed the one document where the philosophy became an order. I knew now what to look for. I did not yet know it was already on its way down the back stair to find me. It came in the person of Tobin Ash, and it came because guilt, like money, must eventually touch ground. I had stopped watching the careful boy closely after he learned to whistle. He had become, I thought, a settled part of the machine, reassured and folded in. But a man can be reassured on the surface and rotting underneath, and Tobin Ash was rotting. I should have seen it sooner. The whistling had been too cheerful. A man who has truly made his peace with a wrong does not whistle, he simply forgets. The whistling was the sound of a man trying to drown out a thing in his own head, and one wet autumn night, near the end of his rope, he came down the gallery to the counting house at an hour when no work was owed, and found me standing my old post. I had taken it back, 2 nights a week. Once the nursery was double-watched and the laundress had learned to fear the doorway, and he stopped and looked at me, and I saw that he had come not to work but to talk, and had not known it until he saw a face he half trusted in the dark. I did not push. You never push a man who has come to you on his own. You stand still and let the silence do the asking. So I said nothing, and he stood in the gallery turning his hat in his hands, and at last he said in a small voice, "You were a clerk before, weren't you?" Hesk said. "I was." "Then you'll know," he said. "You'll know what it's like. When the books are wrong and you're the one who has to write them wrong with your own hand, your own letters in it, your own hand on the page, so that if it's ever found it's your asterisk hand they find, not hers, never hers, only ever yours." He stopped, breathing hard. "She doesn't sign anything. Did you know that? In 3 years I've never once seen her sign a thing. It's all my hand. Every false entry, every onward order, every receipt for a charity that isn't, he could not finish it. He had said too much already, and we both knew it. And he looked, suddenly, terrified, a boy who has run too far down a hill to stop. I had to be very careful now. Tobin Ash was the most precious and the most dangerous thing I had yet found, a witness, a living one, a hand that had written the wrong with full knowledge of it. He could give me in one night what a year of patient reading might never reach. Not the philosophy but the order, not the shape of the machine but the proof that it had a maker. And he could, with one frightened word in the wrong ear, end me, because a guilty man's surest path to safety is to give up someone guiltier, and a guard who had been asking questions would do nicely. "Tobin," I said his given name quietly, the way you speak to a horse that is about to bolt. "You don't have to say anything to me. I'm a guard on a dark corridor. I can't help you and I can't hurt you, but I'll tell you the one thing I learned as a clerk that I'd want a younger man to know." I let that sit. A false entry isn't a wall, son. It's a window. The man who writes the books wrong is the only man in the whole scheme who could ever prove it was a scheme, because his hand is on every page, and his hand can be made to tell the truth as easily as it was made to tell the lie. The people above you are counting on you believing you're trapped. You're not trapped. You're the only one of them who holds the key. He stared at me. I had said more than a dull man should know, and I watched him almost see the reader behind the harmless face, and I held my breath. But guilt is a great blinder. It makes a man see only himself, and Tobin Ash saw in my words not a hunter revealing his hand, but the first kind thing anyone had said to him in 3 years, and his eyes filled, and he nodded and turned, and went back up the gallery without another word. I thought I had lost him. I thought I had pushed after all and frightened the witness off, and that he would go to her, or go silent, or go to pieces. For 3 weeks I heard nothing, and stood my posts, and built nothing new into the book, and felt the year turning cold around me with the work undone. Then on a black morning in late autumn I found, tucked under the corner of the counting-house door where only a man standing that exact post would ever see it, a single folded page. No name on it, no word of explanation. Just a page in a careful clerk's hand that I recognized, because I had spent a year learning the shape of that hand from a distance. A copy, a true copy, made by the only man who could make it, of an onward order, dated in Lady Cray's 3rd year, instructing the firm of Marrow, Quill, and Scythe to disburse a named sum from the foundation for the relief of distressed gentlefolk to one Padraic Hone, under steward of the Queen's table, *, in consideration of his continued good service in the matters we have discussed, and his discretion regarding the same. In consideration of his continued good service, his discretion regarding the same. There it was, not philosophy, an order, a charity's money paid as a wage for service in silence to a servant who stood at the Queen's own door. The window had opened. Tobin Ash, terrified, drowning, had not gone to her and had not gone silent. He had done the bravest thing a frightened man can do. He had reached, in the dark, with no promise of safety, toward the one chance of being clean again, and slid a single true page under a door, and trusted a dull guard he barely knew to know what to do with it. I knew exactly what to do with it. I did the thing a year of patience had taught me. I did not act on it. I did not run with it. I added it to the book. Because one order was not enough. One page could be called a forgery, a single rogue act, a young clerk's misdeed disowned by an innocent mistress. Lady Cray never signed. Her whole defense when it came would be that defense. It was the clerk, the unstable clerk. I knew nothing. One page would hang Tobin Ash and leave her standing. To bring her down I needed not one window but the whole wall made glass, order after order, name after name, the pattern undeniable, so that no court in Eldermore could look at it and say a clerk did this alone. I needed Tobin Ash to keep reaching into the dark. And I needed to keep him alive and unsuspected while he did, which meant I could not so much as nod at him in a gallery, could not thank him, could not protect him with anything but distance. It was the cruelest stretch of the whole year. I knew now that I would win. I could feel the book closing toward its total, see the shape of the ending, and that certainty was the very thing that made the waiting unbearable. Because every night I did not move was another night a frightened boy carried a deadly secret up a back stair. And another night a thin, cold woman might, by some small accident, remember to wonder about the dull man after all. I told myself it was nearly done. I told myself the false dawn was a true one. I let myself, for the first time in a year, believe that patience had nearly paid. That was when it nearly all came apart. It came apart because I had let myself believe, and a believing man relaxes, and a relaxed man is slow. The lesson cost me dearly, and I have never forgotten it. The most dangerous moment in any long patience is not the beginning, when you are sharp with fear, but the end, when you are warm with certainty. Over the next month, Tobin Ash slid 4 more pages under the counting-house door. Each was in onward order. Each named a different bought servant, the clerk of petitions, the head laundress, a second steward I had not known of, a clerk in the office of the Privy Seal who could make a document look as though the crown had blessed it. The wall was becoming glass. I had, by the turn of winter, 6 orders in Tobin's hand in the firm of Marrow, quill and scythe named on every one, and the pattern was no longer a feeling or a column. It was an asterisk case. I could see the day now, only weeks off, when the book would be complete enough that no power on earth could call it one clerk's madness. And then, on a hard, bright morning in the first week of winter, Wren came to me at the range, white-faced, with news from the city, and the warm certainty went out of me like heat out of a coal. Marrow, quill, and scythe were burning their papers. Not all at once, that would have been a confession. But Wren, who by now knew the firm's habits better than its own juniors, had seen the small wrong signs. A brazier in the backyard that had not been there before, lit on days no rubbish was due. A junior clerk carrying boxes down from the firm's record loft, where the old correspondent slept, and not carrying them back up. A sudden, quiet, methodical thinning of a respectable firm's memory. Someone had told the lawyers to be clean. Someone had decided that the old papers, the receipts, the forwarding orders, the whole paper spine of the painted door charities, were no longer an asset but a risk, and had begun, without haste and without panic, to make them not exist. I knew, the moment Wren said it, what it meant, and the knowing was like cold water down the back of the neck. The spider had felt a thread. Not me, I was certain it was not me. I had been crossed off, filed under the harmless. It was Tobin. A clerk who has begun to copy orders in the dark cannot copy them perfectly invisibly forever. A missing few minutes, a sheet of paper unaccounted for, a hand that trembles where it used to be steady, something, somewhere, had been noticed, and Lady Verena Cray, who missed nothing, had begun, quietly, to clean her house. And a woman who is cleaning her paper house will not, for long, leave a living clerk standing in it who knows where every false entry lies. The papers were the first thing to go. Tobin Ash would be the next, not by violence, I prayed. Her way was kindness. He would be pensioned, promoted to some distant post, sent to a daughter's house in the country he did not have, gone, in any case, beyond my reach and beyond the reach of any court, his living testimony converted into a comfortable, deniable silence. I had perhaps days, maybe a week, and I was not ready. This was the false dawn turned false indeed, and it set before me the exact temptation the post is built to refuse, the reasonable, ruinous middle road. Every sensible instinct screamed the same thing: move now. Take what you have, 6 orders, 9 names, a witness, go over the household entirely, go straight to the Queen, throw the half-finished book down before her and beg her to act before the papers are ash and the witness is gone. It was reasonable. It might even have worked. And it would almost certainly have destroyed everything, and I knew it, and knowing it was the hardest knowledge of the year, because I did not know how high the bought hands reached. I knew the clerk of petitions was bought, the very office that decided which pleas reached the Queen's hand. I knew the steward of her table was bought, the man who arranged whom she saw. To go to the Queen, an ordinary guardsman with an extraordinary accusation, I would have to pass through the household, through the clerks and stewards and intercessors who stood between any common man and his sovereign. And every one of those doors might be a bought door, might carry my half-finished book not up to the Queen but sideways, down the back stair, into the cold gray hands of the woman it accused. I would be handing her my evidence, my witness, and my own neck, and giving her the few days she needed to make all 3 disappear with kindness. The reasonable road led straight into the spider's mouth. I had built my whole year on refusing it, and now, at the worst possible moment, with the papers burning and the witness in danger, refusing it was a thing very near to cowardice, and felt exactly like it. I stood the range that night, and the gallery the next, and I did not move, and it was the worst stillness of my life, worse than the wine in Lady Cray's bright room, worse than the laundress at the door. Because this time the stillness might be a child's word for letting an innocent man be carried off. I lay awake doing the arithmetic of it, the terrible arithmetic, weighing a half-built case I could finish against a witness I might lose, and I could not make the columns balance, and there is no honor in a man who pretends such moments are easy. They are not. The whole meaning of the red wool, I came to understand that sleepless week, is not that the disciplined man does not feel the pull to move. It is that he feels it fully, in all its reasonable force, and weighs it true, and still does not move until moving is *right and not merely *bearable. So I did not run to the Queen, but neither did I stand wholly still, because standing wholly still would lose me the witness, and the witness was a man, a frightened brave young man who had reached into the dark trusting me, and a man is not a column in a book. I had protected a child at the cost of my invisibility. I would protect Tobin Ash at the cost of my patience if it came to that. The plan is never the purpose. The purpose is the people the plan is for. I did the only thing that was both quiet and enough. I sent Wren, fast, careful Wren, not to the Queen, whom I could not safely reach, but to the one man in the whole palace I had reason to believe was both honest and entirely outside Lady Cray's reach. The one man whose love of correct, complete, properly placed records made him incorruptible, and whose vault held the public face of every charity in Harrowgate. The man who had told me, a year before, that he could not answer where an honest man goes to be heard. I sent Wren to Master Edric Pell with a single folded message, and the message was not a plea and not an accusation. It was, fittingly, a clerk's message, the only kind Pell would heed. It said, "The almshouse rolls are about to be made false beyond recovery. The working papers that prove them false are being burned in the city tonight. You once told me you could not answer where an honest man goes to be heard. I think I have found the answer. But I need 3 days, and I need the rolls in your vault kept exactly as they are, sealed and witnessed, no matter who asks to amend them. Will you keep them?" It was a gamble with everything on it. If Pell was not the man I thought, if even he had a price or a fear, I had just handed the spider the last thread. But I had spent a year learning, line by patient line, to read not only books but the men who keep them, and everything I knew of Edric Pell said that there was one thing in this world he would not allow, not for a price, not for a threat, not for his queen herself. He would not let a record be made false on his watch. Wren came back near midnight and pressed into my hand a single folded page, Pell's answer, and I read it by the gallery's one lamp. It said only, "The rolls are sealed. I have witnessed them myself before the keeper of the hall, who is honest and now knows they must not be touched. You have your 3 days. Do not waste them, guardsmen. The last man who found this and waited too long is in the country, and the orphans are still hungry. Finish it. Finish it." I folded the page and stood in the dark, and the fear did not leave me. The papers were still burning. Tobin was still in danger. The spider was still cleaning her house. But under the fear, for the first time, was the thing patience exists to earn. Not certainty, but standing. The rolls were safe. The public truth could no longer be quietly amended into a lie. Whatever happened to the working papers in the city, the gap in the almshouse account was now sealed and witnessed, and could be pointed to forever. I had 3 days. And I knew, at last, what I would do with them. Not the reasonable thing, not the safe thing, but the one quiet move that would let the finished book be heard by the one person it had to reach, over the heads of every bought door between us, without ever passing through a single hand that Lady Verena Cray had bought. I would make her bring me to the Queen herself. The The plan was the simplest I had made all year, and the most dangerous, and it turned on a single truth I had learned in that bright warm room over a glass of untouched wine. Lady Verena Cray did not trust violence and did not trust silence. She trusted asterisk kindness, the placing, the pensioning, the comfortable removal of a problem in a way that left no body and no question. It was her one method, and a method is a door if you know which way it opens. I needed to reach the Queen over the heads of every bought door in the household. There was exactly one occasion on which a common guardsman could be brought into the Queen's own presence without passing through a single steward or clerk of the household. The Queen heard, once a month in open court, a small number of petitions from her own servants, a tradition of her mother's, the very same Queen Aldrich whose almshouse had been hollowed out. Any servant of the crown might ask to be heard. But the asterisk list of who was heard and in what order and who was turned away at the door, that list was kept by the Office of Petitions, by the Clerk of Petitions, by Master Tolliver who was bought. So I could not get onto the list by honest means. The bought clerk would see a guard's name and bury it, or worse, carry it down the back stair. I had to get onto the list by a means the bought clerk would never think to block, and I had to make Lady Cray herself the one who put me there. Here is what I did. I went openly in daylight to the Clerk of Petitions, and I petitioned not against Lady Cray, but for her. I asked, as a humble guardsman who had been shown a great kindness by the mistress of the household, to be permitted to stand before the Queen and speak a word of public thanks to Lady Verena Cray for her charity to the realm's worn-out servants, and to commend, before the whole court, the good work of the Queen's almshouse and the many fine foundations the household supported. I brought it as flattery. I brought it as a dull, sentimental, harmless man's wish to praise his betters in public. The bought Clerk of Petitions did exactly what a bought clerk would do with a petition that glorified his secret mistress. He passed it up to her for her pleasure. Of course he did. It made her look good. It cost nothing. It was the kind of small public ornament a great lady collects. And Lady Cray, when it reached her, I have always been sure of this, though I was not in the room, would have smiled her cold, thin smile and thought, the dull guard, the creature of habit, grateful for his glass of wine, wishing to praise me in open court. How perfectly harmless, how perfectly useful. And she would have written, in her own hand, or had it written, the one instruction that put me where I needed to be. Let the guardsman be heard. She put me on the list. The spider, certain I was a fly, carried me herself into the one room she could not control, to say a thing she was certain would flatter her, before the one person in Eldermore she could not buy. The Court of Petitions was held in the Lesser Hall, 3 days later, the last of my 3 days, the very edge of Pell's grace. I had the book now as complete as it would ever be. The sealed almshouse rolls in Pell's witnessed vault, the 9 painted door charities mapped by Wren, the firm of Marrow, Quill, and Scythe, the 6 onward orders in Tobin Ash's hand, each one paying a charity's money as a wage for service and silence to a servant at the Queen's own door. And holding it all together, the thing only I possessed, the order of it, the pattern, the whole engine laid out so that a child could follow it from the orphan's empty bowl to the bought hand on the Queen's lever. I carried it in a plain leather case, and I carried it openly, because a man hiding something looks furtive and a man holding a case looks like a clerk, and I had spent a year being a clerk. I will tell you how the hall looked, because I had a year to imagine it, and it was both more and less than I imagined. The Queen sat raised, in plain state, not gaudy Saraland, never gaudy. The Prince Consort Aldrich stood at her shoulder, broad and quiet, reading the room as he read everything. And ranged below and about the court, the great officers, the favored, the curious, and there, near the front, in gray silk, thin and cool and entirely composed, the Lady Verena Cray, come to enjoy being praised, with her bought stewards and her bought clerks somewhere in the press behind her, none of them knowing that the dull guard's leather case held the unwriting of all of it. My name was called. I stepped forward onto the open floor. I bowed to the Queen. And then I did a thing I had promised myself through a whole year of patience, that I would do exactly right, not loudly, not with a flourish, not with the rage that had been building in me since I first added the orphan's gap. I had learned that the loud man is easy to dismiss and easy to bury, and that the only voice in that hall that could not be frightened or bought or pensioned to the country was not my voice at all. So I did not accuse anyone. I kept my word. "Your Majesty," I said, "I asked leave to stand here and praise the Lady Cray's charity and the good work of the Queen's almshouse. I find I cannot." A small stir. The cool gray eyes near the front went very still. "I cannot praise the almshouse, Majesty, because I have read its books, and the almshouse is hungry. 3 years ago it fed and warmed 200 of the crown's worn-out servants. This winter it feeds and warms 130. The court's giving to it has doubled. The bread reaching it has fallen by a third. I am a plain man and a former clerk, and I cannot make those two numbers stand in the same room without a thief between them." I did not look at Lady Cray. I looked only at the Queen. That was the whole of my discipline in that moment, to speak to the one incorruptible person in the hall and let the guilty hear it sideways, as I had taught myself, a year ago, to hear the truth. "Majesty, I make no accusation against any person. I am not fit to. But I hold here the books, the public rolls, sealed and witnessed 3 days ago by your own master of records, who will swear they have not been touched, and certain working papers in a clerk's own hand that explain where the almshouse's bread has gone. I ask only one thing. I ask that you do not let any officer of your household take these papers from my hand or read them to you on my behalf. I ask that you read them yourself, Majesty, with your own eyes. Everything I have found turns on that single point, that they reach no hand but yours. If I am a fool, your own eyes will show you I am a fool, and you may send me back to my post. But I beg you, your own eyes and no others." The hall was utterly silent. I had broken every rule of a petition. I had refused to be relieved of my burden by the very household whose business this was. I had asked a queen before her whole court to trust a guardsman over her own great officers, and to do it sight unseen. It was an outrageous thing to ask. It was the only thing I had. And Queen Saralind, who has the rarest gift a powerful person can have, the habit of asking, before she does a thing, whether it is the right thing and not merely the easy one, looked at me for a long moment with eyes that gave nothing away. And then she did not call for an officer, and she did not wave me off, and she did not pass my case to the smiling man at her household's head. She held out her own hand for the leather case. A page came forward to carry it the few steps from me to the dais, and I felt my heart stop, because a page is a servant of the household, and a household had bought hands in it. But the Queen, without looking away from me, said, quietly, "No. Let the guardsman bring it himself." And so I crossed the open floor of the lesser hall, past the gray silk and the still gray eyes, and I laid the case in the Queen's own hands, and no other hand touched it, and the whole year came down to that one short walk across a stone floor. What happened next did not happen quickly, and that was its terror and its power. A loud accusation can be shouted down. A document cannot. The Queen opened the case and she read, and the court had to stand and watch her read, in a silence that grew heavier with every page, because there is nothing on earth so frightening to the guilty as a powerful person reading slowly and saying nothing. She read the sealed almshouse rolls first, and I saw her find the gap, saw the small line appear between her brows that I would come to know as the Queen doing arithmetic. She read the map of the 9 charities, the painted doors, the old man over the chandler's shop who had never relieved a distressed gentleman in his life. And then she came to Tobin Ash's 6 pages, the onward orders, the charities bread paid as a wage for asterisk, continued good service and discretion regarding the same. And I watched the line between her brows become something colder and far worse for the people who had earned it. Because Queen Saralind reading about a stranger's coin in the pocket of the laundress of her children's nursery, was not a queen doing arithmetic any longer. She was a mother who had just been shown how close the wolf had stood for 3 years to the door. She read every page. She let the silence do to that court what a year of it had done to Tobin Ash. And then she lifted her head, and she did not look at me, and she did not raise her voice. She had no need. She had learned the same lesson I had, that the quiet word in a silent room is the loudest sound there is, and she said, "Lady Cray, come and stand where the guardsman stood." I will not pretend the gray silk woman crumbled. She did not. She was the cleverest person in that hall, and she knew, the instant the queen held out her own hand for the case, that her one method had failed her, that there was no kindness to be done here, no quiet placing, no pension to the country, because the matter had passed in a single short walk across a stone floor, beyond the reach of any door she had bought. She came forward composed, and she stood where I had stood, and she said, in a voice as level as a ruled line, "Majesty, I have never in my life signed a single one of those papers. They are the work of a clerk. If wrong has been done, it is his hand on every page, and I knew nothing of it." It was a good defense. It was the only defense. It was the very defense I had foreseen a season ago, when Tobin Ash slid the first page under my door, and I made myself wait for more. Because one page hangs the clerk and leaves the mistress standing, and she had built her whole house on never signing. But the queen had read the whole book, and the whole book answered her, and the answer was not in any one page but in the pattern across all of them, the thing only a year of patient reading could have assembled. "You are right," the queen said. "There is no name of yours on any page. A clerk's hand wrote them all." She let that hang, let Lady Cray's composure settle on it like a bird on a branch. But a clerk does not invent 9 charities and place them, each, on a forwarding road to the same firm of lawyers. A clerk does not choose which of my servants to pay and find the laundress of my children's rooms, and the steward of my table, and the very clerk who decides which of my people's pleas I am permitted to hear. A clerk executes. He does not design. This, and she lifted Corin's case, the finished book, just slightly, is a design. And the office that designed it, the office through which every charitable penny in my household was made to flow before it flowed anywhere else, the office that relieved an honest old controller of his sums 3 years ago because he had begun to count, is yours, Lady Cray. Not your hand, your design. And I find I cannot make those *2 facts stand in the same room without a builder between them. She had used my own words. I cannot make those 2 numbers stand in the same room without a thief between them. She gave them back to the woman in gray silk, and they landed, and for the first time the level voice was not quite level. It was over after that, though it took some weeks to be over in the way of law. The queen did not have Lady Verena Cray dragged from the hall. That was not her way, and it was not necessary. She had the Prince Consort Aldrich, who outranked every officer of the household and was bought by no one, take charge, that very hour, of the household's books, the counting house, and the seal, so that not one further page could be burned or amended. She had the firm of Marrow, Quill, and Scythe sealed by the Crown's own men before the day was out, their burning interrupted, enough of the paper spines surviving to confirm every line Tobin Ash had copied. And she stripped Lady Cray of every office, every key, every place in the household, before the court that had watched her be exposed, so that the whole machine, every bought servant in it, understood in a single afternoon that the woman they had been quietly serving was finished, and that their hidden wages had bought them nothing but a share in her fall. Lady Cray was not executed. Eldermore does not hang its courtiers for cleverness, and the queen, even then, was the queen. She was barred from the court and from every office of the crown for the rest of her life. Her hidden fortune, the portion of the orphan's bread she had kept for herself, seized and returned, to the last penny, to the almshouse it had been stolen from. She was sent away, in the end, to a small house in the country, to a daughter's house, as it happened. The same fate she had used for 3 years to silence honest men, handed back to her as her own, not as cruelty, but as the exact and balanced consequence of her own design, which is the only justice a ledger ever gives. Every entry answered the account brought level, nothing more and nothing less. The bought servants were dealt with each according to his deed. Most had taken the coin in the soft way Lady Cray had perfected, believing they were merely appreciated, never quite letting themselves see what the appreciation bought. They were dismissed. Some, the ones who came forward and told the truth, were spared worse and allowed to seek honest work elsewhere. The clerk of petitions, who had buried his queen's people's pleas for pay, was not spared. And the laundress of the nursery, the loaded lever, the stranger's coin closest to the children, was gone from the palace by nightfall. And I stood that night in the nursery gallery, my old volunteer post, and watched the door of the room where the Princess Maelin slept, and felt for the first time in a year that the gap in the wall was truly filled by a thing stronger than my own body standing in it, by the truth, read and answered, by a queen who now knew exactly where the wolf had stood. But I have left out the most important person, and I will not leave him out, because a man is not a column in a book. Tobin Ash. I had spent a season unable to so much as nod at him, protecting him with distance, terrified that a kind word would mark him. When the Crown's men sealed the household offices, his was the hand on every false page, and the law, which is blunt where a ledger is fine, does not at first distinguish the hand that wrote the lie from the head that ordered it. For one terrible week it looked as though the brave, frightened boy who had slid 6 true pages under a door, trusting a guard he barely knew, would be the only one to hang for it, exactly as Lady Cray had always designed that he should. I could not stand still under that either. So I did the last thing a year of silence had earned me the right to do. I asked to be heard one more time, not in open court but privately, by the Prince Consort Aldrich, who held the household now. And I told him the truth I had never written down, that there was a window in the wall and the window had a name, and the name had chosen, with everything to lose and nothing promised, to be the one part of the machine that turned against itself. Majesty, I said, for he was as near a king as Eldermore had, the clerk's hand is on every page. That is true. But the clerk's hand is also the only reason any of this can be proven, because he copied it out in the dark, knowing it would be his hand they found, and slid it to me anyway. A man who turns the only key against the lock that holds him is not the criminal of this story. He is the one honest thing the criminal could not buy. I do not know that I saved Tobin Ash by saying it. I think the Queen, who read the whole book, had already seen the shape of him in it, had noticed, as I had, that the same careful hand wrote both the lie and the proof of the lie, and had understood what that meant about the man. But I said it, and I am glad I said it, because a man who has used another man's courage owes him at least his voice. Tobin Ash was not hanged. He was dismissed from the household, which broke his heart, for he had loved the work before it was poisoned. But he was not ruined and not imprisoned, and the Queen, in a quiet act that I think was her truest verdict on the whole matter, saw to it that he was given honest employment, far from the court, in a counting-house in a port town, where a careful young man with a gift for sums and a conscience he had learned the hard way could begin again. I had a letter from him once, a year on. It was, fittingly, very neatly kept. It said only that the books where he worked now were true, and that he slept. I have kept it. It is the only page of this whole affair I ever allowed myself to write down, and the only one I would save from a fire. Wren Aldis, who had walked the city streets for me asking after doors painted on walls, would take no reward, and was furious that I tried to give her one. I didn't do it for pay, she said with that fierce dignity, and if you pay me you make it the thing they all did, meaning the bought ones, the Tollivers and the Greaves, and it isn't that. It was never that. She was right and I was ashamed, and I never offered again. But I told the Queen what she had done, all of it, the painted doors and the firm's habits and the brazier in the backyard, and Queen Saralind, who learns the names of scullery maids' sick mothers, learned Wren's and remembered it, and Wren rose, not by a stranger's coin, but in the open, on the strength of her own sharp, honest work. To be, in time, the trusted keeper of the Queen's own private correspondence. She carries the realm's most careful secrets now, and not one of them has ever gone astray, and the realm does not know it owes her anything, which is exactly how she likes it. And Master Edric Pell, who could not be flattered or bought, who had told me a year before that he could not answer where an honest man goes to be heard, Pell got his answer, and I think it gave him more peace than any honor could. He had sealed the rolls. He had witnessed them. He had held the line of the record against every pressure, and the record had held, and the truth had been able to stand on it. When it was over, I went down to his dusty vault to thank him, and he waved it off the way he waved off everything that was not a misfiled page. But as I was leaving, he said to my back in his flat, dry voice, "You added them up. That was all, the whole of it. You were the second man in 3 years to add them up, but you were the first to find out where an honest man goes to be heard." And I turned, and he was almost smiling. "He goes nowhere," Pell said. "He stays exactly where he is, at his own post, and does his own work so well and so quietly that one day the truth has nowhere left to go but up. You did not raise your voice, guardsmen. You made the numbers loud enough to be heard without it. Remember that. It is the only kind of justice that cannot be pensioni to the country." I have remembered it. I remember it still on the nights I stand the gallery, for I am there yet. I asked to stay, and the Queen, who offered me anything, understood when I asked for nothing but my old dull post. The counting-house corridor, the worst post in the building, the most useful post in Eldermore if you know how to stand it. People ask me sometimes, the few who know the story, for it is not widely told. The Queen kept it quiet, and so do I, how I held my patience through a whole year, knowing what I knew, watching the orphans go hungry and the wolf stand at the children's door, and never once breaking, never once shouting, never once charging in to put it right with my own 2 hands. They ask it as though the stillness were the hard part. The stillness was not the hard part. The stillness was the only part that worked. I had stood post long enough by then to have learned the lesson the red wool exists to teach, though it took this whole affair to teach it to me down to the bone, that there is a kind of strength that looks, from the outside, exactly like doing nothing, and is in truth the hardest thing a man can do. The arrogant believe power is the raised hand, the loud word, the order obeyed. They are wrong, and Lady Verena Cray, who was cleverer than all of them, was wrongest of all. She believed power was the hidden hand, the bought lever, the quiet network of obligation, and she was so very nearly right that she nearly took a kingdom apart with it. But there is a power deeper than the raised hand and deeper than the hidden one, and it is the power of the man who can wait, who can see the whole wrong, and feel the whole pull to set it right too soon, and weigh it true, and hold, and hold, and hold, until the moment when one quiet move sets everything right at once and cannot be undone. A ledger does not raise its voice. I told you that at the start, and I have kept faith with it. It only sits, line upon patient line, and waits for someone to read it the way it was written, slowly, and from the side and all the way to the end. I read it that way. It took me the better part of a year, and it cost me my invisibility and a sleepless winter and more fear than I have told even here. But the almshouse is full again, 200 of the crown's worn-out servants, fed and warmed, the bread reaching the hands it was meant for, every penny of it, because a thin, cold woman's hidden fortune was poured back into the empty bowl she had drained. The children sleep behind a door no stranger's coin holds open. The Queen knows now where the levers of her own house truly reach, and tests them gently from time to time, and is harder to take apart than she was. And I stand my dull post in the dark gallery, 4 nights of 7, the counting-room man who came to the work the wrong way around, and I listen to the palace breathe, and I keep in my head my second set of books, not of the money but of the small wrong things, the held breaths, the nods that come once when they should come twice. For I have learned that a wrong does not announce itself. It whispers the first time, and it whispers low. And the whole of my work in both my lives has only ever been this: to stand still and to listen, and to read the quiet line that does not want to be read, and then to wait, with everything in me wanting to move, until the day the numbers themselves are ready to speak. They always are, in the end. You have only to be patient enough to let them.